Neil Hansen is like a combination of Han Solo, Captain Jack Sparrow, and Forrest Gump. Early in his aviation career, Neil flew for the Teamsters during Jimmy Hoffa's final days. During the Vietnam War, he flew for Air America, a civilian airline owned and operated by the CIA. For 10 years in Southeast Asia, Neil pushed airplanes and flight crews beyond their credible limits, flying in and out of places that nature never intended for aircraft, often under hostile fire. In April of 1975, Neil flew one of the last flights out of Cambodia, barely escaping the Khmer Rouge as they ascended to power there. If treacherous terrain, wild weather, and bad guys' bullets couldn't kill him in the air, Neil's own proclivities on the ground probably should have, more than once. But he survives, and in this episode, we'll hear the second half of my interview with him. Stick around. From the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, founders of The Wall, this is Echoes of the Vietnam War. I'm your host, Michael Crone, bringing you stories of service, sacrifice, and healing from people who still feel the impact of that conflict more than 50 years later. Episode 85, Air America, Part 2. Right after this.
Hello, I'm Gary Sinise. Nearly 3 million Americans served in Vietnam, and more than 58,000 have their names inscribed on the wall. Those that pay the ultimate price in service to America. Some might ask why the Vietnam War still matters. It matters because more than 58,000 lives were cut short and their families forever changed. It matters because we should never forget how Vietnam veterans were treated when they came home. A lesson learned so that our current generation of veterans are treated with respect. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, the organization that built the wall, works to ensure that future generations will understand the war's impact. I'm asking you to help keep the promise the wall was built on. Never forget. Visit vvmf.org to find out how you can get involved.
Neil Hansen's book, Flight, an Air America pilot's story of adventure, descent, and redemption, is available on Amazon. It covers a lot more ground than we could in this discussion, and every bit of it is fascinating. This is the second half of my interview with Neil. The first half was featured in episode 84, so if you haven't already, consider listening to that one first. This episode will make a lot more sense if you've heard the first half. Neil spoke to me via Zoom from his home in Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
I exposed everybody that I was involved with when I was a flight instructing and an assistant manager of flying to the unusual, because the unusual's right here. There was a lot of new hires that came in that were totally unready for it.
Yeah.
We even had some that got off the airplane in Saigon. They heard gunfire in the distance, and they got right back on the airplane and left, which was probably a good thing. They probably saved their own life. You know, they can't handle it unusual.
Right.
If you can't cope with it, we got a problem. I'm going to send you home.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's an interesting part of your book, the Marquis de Sade school of flying, right? Which is, but it's for a reason, right? You know, what's interesting to me is, was this just instinct? You just knew that was the sort of thing people were going to have to be used to, or had you flown some missions in Southeast Asia and learned it by experience?
I had flown a little bit by myself, of course, when they checked me out as a captain. There was no orientation flights other than you get in there and you go where the USAID customer or the agency guy tells you where to go. You had a regular schedule, and you'd fly to all of these trips. And it was a learning process from the get-go. But I knew how to fly in and out of dirt strips and things like that. And I knew how to fly the airplane and take it to its limits and beyond. The airplane will do a lot more than what's in the manual. It will perform much better than what you think it can. And you got to have a feel for these things. And to me, an airplane was an extension of the body. And as we got slow and it was starting to get close to a stall speed, which means we were running out of airspeed, you could feel it shudder. And in the steep turns and things like that, you could hear the moan of the airplane and feel it responding to you. And if you could take it well beyond what the manufacturer was intending it to do, and we did.
So it's Saigon, 1965. You're a captain,
Instructor pilot.
evaluating and training other pilots. What is first of all, remind me how old you would have been in 65?
26.
26. Man, that is just astounding. So, and are you thinking that you're going to be in Southeast Asia for a limited amount of time?
I knew I was going to be there for a while because it was kind of the playground that I liked. It was kind of where I belonged. Some people, the thought of having somebody out there in the dirt shooting at you with bad intent would kind of crater their minds. For me, it didn't. I thought I could outwit all of those guys, and I did for quite a while.
You were there at the very beginning of the buildup, and then you were the guy who flew the last flight out of Cambodia in 75.
That's right.
So you were there the whole time that Air America was really up and running there.
Yeah, I rode the horse until it died.
Was that unusual? Were there other pilots who were there as long as you were?
Not many. Shower Shoes, Wilson, Randall Richardson, and a few of the others. George Calhoun were there, but they've all passed.
Why would you stay for 10 years?
Adrenaline is my drug of choice. I'm addicted to it, actually. Now that I've got long in the tooth, not so much. I know my reactions are not anywhere as close to what they were back then. And I'd be just fresh meat then.
The mission pretty much is to supply people who are fighting the communists.
That's right.
Outside of the areas where American troops are supposed to be.
Right. There was a lot of little special forces sites around that we resupplied and the rest of that. One of note was up at Nanco, and that was actually in a logging area of Vietnam. And there was elephants they used to skid the logs out of the jungle. The A team that was there was run by a first lieutenant and also a senior master sergeant by the name of Vukovic. Now, his brother was killed in the Indy 500 during his racing career there. But Sergeant Vukovic was a real stand-up guy. And there was people like that around that were just magnificent. A lot of the special forces guys, I had one good friend was a special forces medic. He'd been a Quaker, surprisingly, and he was with an A team and used to hang out with him at the special forces bar there in Saigon. And that was a lot of fun too. We had a tremendous amount of fun. No, some of it is not fun. Some of it is sad. I lost people. There in October of 65, they made me assistant manager of flying. So I was in charge of several aircraft programs there, the training and scheduling and everything else of those. And that's where I ended up doing the body bag work and investigating accidents. And accidents are going to happen. No matter how good you are, the bad guys are out there trying to ruin your day. Mm-hmm. And unless you stay really far ahead of them and have a lot of luck, you're going to get hurt eventually.
Normally, I talk to people who spent anywhere from 1 to 3 years in
Right.
Vietnam. Now I'm talking to a guy who was there for 10 years. I don't even know how to ask this question. Are there any are there any missions that really stand out in your memory as ones that you didn't think you should have come home from?
Only one of the last ones when I got shot down in Laos, but we had what they called black flights. Now, a black flight was something that you did and you didn't talk about it to anybody until your secrecy agreement ran out in 1984, which is a long ways in the future. But I had one as an assistant manager flying, and George Calhoun, our chief pilot, he called me into the office and he said, I want you to get a Twin Beach, fully fuel it, file a flight plan to Bangkok. But as you get near to Bangkok, I want you to divert to Tak Lee, Royal Thai Air Force Base. And you're going to have a passenger coming out from the embassy. I don't want you to look at him. He will have an escort. So I want you to take that airplane, put it out on a ramp, climb into the cockpit, and wait. Well, I did. And I waited and waited. And you're looking at a cockpit temperature of over 110 degrees. And your fingernails are almost starting to sweat. But finally, a black embassy car pulled onto the ramp. And whoever it was seen by all of the ramp workers, but they don't want me to see him. And I thought that was a little unusual. But they climbed into the thing, closed the cabin door, and the embassy escort tapped on the cockpit door and crank it up and go. And I did. And everything went fine. And flied a regular flight plan and got close to Bangkok and told them I'm diverting to my alternate. And they rogered that, and I headed on up to the north of Bangkok and landed at Tak Lee. Got to the ramp there, and we had our own ramp there. The Blackbird also had a ramp there. And he got off into another curtained vehicle, and off he went. Now, who the hell it was, I have no idea. It could have been Adolf Hitler.
I think it was Jimmy Hoffa. That's why they didn't want you to look at him.
Could be. But refueled, started to taxi back out. And I got off the ramp and on the taxiway, and a Thai Jeep pulled in front of me with a 50 caliber mounted on top and had me stop and get out of the airplane. And I find whenever in danger or doubt, get really stupid. And that helps an awful lot. And they asked, where are you going? I said, I'm going home. And where you're home? Saigon. Why are you here? Me lost. And we did that for 3 days, and they finally let me go back. But, supposedly the embassy had this all laid on, but obviously they lied to me. So that was not a good lesson. Don't take everything they say as the gospel truth. They might be putting you into a situation that you can't get out of. So that was a good lesson. And another one out of Saigon, got a call in the middle of the night. I had a radio beside my bed so that they could get a hold of me if there's a schedule change or anything else. But they called at about 10 o'clock at night and after curfew in Saigon and said, we want you to pick up an American to be a co-pilot for you in a C-46 and get out here. We're sending an escort for you from the embassy and the Vietnamese. And we did. And ruined this guy's night of sleep and got out to operations. And there's one of the spooks from the embassy there, and he gets me aside. Now, why? He doesn't want my co-pilot to hear this because he's going to be sitting right beside me. I had no idea, but I thought it was silly as hell. And he said, I've got a load of stuff in the C-46 out there, and I want you to take it nonstop to Hong Kong.
To where?
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong.
And don't tell anybody about it. Do not file a flight plan. maintain radio silence until you get close to Hong Kong, give them a call, and they'll clear you to land. Well, that's going to put me at the edge of my fuel window in that C-46, even with full tanks. And if they won't clear me to land, I'm either going to have to go ahead and bust on in and land and face the music, or ditch the damn thing. But got out the airplane, and it's loaded with tear gas grenades and all kinds of crowd control stuff that is illegal as hell in Hong Kong. The British still had that as a crown colony. And okay, took off and got about 50 miles outside of Hong Kong and gave them a call. And they simply cleared me to land. Okay, got in there, and I figured they'd park me off to the side somewhere, but no, they had me parked right in the front of the terminal with the bright lights, and props were spinning down to a stop, and Hong Kong police stake bed truck pulled out from the side of the terminal. And I thought, ah, boy, this is not going to be a pretty picture. But opened the cargo door on the side of the airplane, and they said, we had riots here and we need this crowd control stuff. Okay. And simply went home the same way, not talking to anybody. It was a successful trip.
So you were there for 10 years. I mean, look, rounding down, right? If you don't count Tokyo, you get to Saigon in 65, you leave in 75. How many days a year are you in the cockpit?
I was in the cockpit probably 25 days out of every month, either giving check rides or training people or flying the line.
And if you had to guess how many of those days that you're, in the air across 10 years or in an average year, are you being shot at?
In Vietnam, it was kind of a unique situation. The pay scale in that place was you only got paid for the time the wheels were off the ground. Didn't make any difference how long you sat on a ramp waiting for takeoff. And also, they only paid you hazard pay, that either $5 or the $10 for hazard pay for 10 minutes after you took off and 10 minutes before you landed. They didn't have any missiles there at that time. Later on, they did. But the other bad thing is that in Laos, you got paid from day one, full flight. You got your hazard pay. And that made that place much more attractive. So in 1969, I bugged them constantly. I didn't want to be an assistant manager flying. I wanted just to go up to Laos and fly an airplane and have a crew to worry about, and that's all. I didn't want to have to babysit all of these guys and have a radio by my bed that can disturb my sleep at any time of the day or night. This was where I wanted to be. And that's really where the real conflict was going on. It had been going on for a long, long time. Laos was a neutral country, but everybody was there. All the combatants were there. The Red Chinese were there, the communist Laotians, the French were still up there, the Russians were there. Anybody in the world that had it in for us had an embassy up there, which made that a real interesting spot. And they relinquished, and they sent me up to Vientiane, Laos, Sin City on the Mekong, which was wonderful.
And how old are you? How old are you now?
This was in 69, so
yeah, you're 30. Yeah.
I'm ready for the rest of the war.
You're not getting tired of this at all. You're like, turn it up.
No, it's good for you. I think adrenaline is probably one of the bottles of youth that you can have. It keeps your mind going. If it's not going, it's going to be dead.
So 1969, you're looking to turn the adrenaline pump up a little bit. You go to Laos. How's your day different in Laos than it was in Saigon?
Well, in Laos, it was a stabilized schedule, and you could fly 20 days out of the month and have 10 days off. They called it scheduled time off, or STO. And this was great because that allowed you to go ahead and have little adventures. Go up to Taipei, or go to Hong Kong for 10 days, go down to Malaysia for 10 days. And I even went down to New Zealand and also to India and did a tiger hunt. And this time off gave you time to empty your stress bottle and become somewhat human again. Because the playpens in Laos were wild, to say the least. There was places there that were not on the A-list of cuisine or anything else. There was a place there that called a White Rose that had exotic entertainment, to be kind. Mm-hmm. And there was one lady in there that I really felt sorry for, because she was a mute. I wouldn't call them deaf and dumb. She was far from dumb. She was pretty smart, but she couldn't talk, except in grunts and things like that. She was trying to talk. And I go and talk to her that way and gesture. And she was a good mime. And the rest of the people there thought I could speak her language, which was great. And luckily, that lady ended up marrying somebody from the embassy and is living down in Florida today.
Now, speaking of that, what are your language skills? What are the requirements for you? And what are your abilities?
My abilities are very limited, other than basic phrases and things like that. No good, bomi. Of course, you pick up a little bit from the loadmasters we had in the back, which were Thai and Lao. And it basically basic stuff. A little Lao, a little Thai, a little Chinese, but just enough to order food and have fun.
Yeah. Now, you said that you wanted to go to Laos in '69, because that's where the real war was happening. And
that's right.
So I'm assuming that meant more danger for you.
Yes, it was more danger, but there again, you get a chance to exercise your survival skills and pay attention, for God's sakes. I was not kind to co-pilots in the 123. The 123 was unusual because we used American co-pilots. The C-46s, we used Lao and Thai co-pilots in those things. And airdropping was my fun. That was what I really, really enjoyed. It was a ballet in the sky. And we dropped everything from rice to munitions, fuel, all sorts of stuff like that.
Can you say more about? Can you say more about Ballet in the sky?
Ballet in the sky was airdropping,
right?
And that you'd slow the airplane down to 120 knots, so that the chutes could deploy without ripping apart. And you'd be airdropping for free fall from 800 feet, and the others down as low as 400 feet for the parachutes to open. You'd fly a racetrack pattern. And on final, the back end of the airplane would be opened up. Whatever cargo you wanted to drop would be positioned back against what they called a cut strap, right, keeping it from falling off the ramp. your nose is up a little bit on this thing at 120 knots. And as you pick a spot that you're aiming for and want to drop, you'd call drop over the intercom. The loadmaster in the back would take his knife and cut that strap, which would allow that pallet to roll out the back of the airplane. With a little help from bringing the jets up to 100%, which had been idling at 60%, and adding more power to the reciprocating engines, the acceleration would cause it to roll right out the back promptly and allow the parachutes to open. And they like bullseye the DZ. But there was accidents on those things. And one I had up in Laos, just below the plane de jars, I was dropping fuel drums. And I came in, and it was a nice, big, secure area. And on the first pass, I had an American loadmaster in the back. And normally when you call drop and it goes off the back end of the ramp, they'll call load clear. And no, you can turn then. But this time he said, "Oh my God." And I figured, well, we're getting shot at. So I cranked it over to the left hard. And as I could see what was happening with a load that went off the back of the ramp, 3 of the parachutes were right in the middle of the DZ. But there was also 2 parachutes falling down like a bag of rags with nothing underneath them. And there was a bloom of fire from the trenches around the site, which meant those drums had come off and pre-fell down to where they had their noon cooking fires going and burned up some guys. And customer on the ground came on, says, Big Bird, get out of here. You burn us up." And I did. I went back to Vinchin where they'd rigged the load and told them what went on. And felt pretty bad about killing some of our own guys. That's not a good feeling. But exercise more care in checking that load back there. And that was a bad day.
Yeah.
But things like that happened.
We'll be back after a short break. Stick around. Let's talk about the wall for a minute. It is widely considered to be the memorial that changed memorials forever. Its design invites a level of engagement, of introspection, of reverence that no fountain, no statue of a cannon or a man on a horse could ever match. The volunteers who work there often talk about wall magic, that unexpected, often spiritual connection or discovery that happens when you visit the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. It's one of the reasons why the wall's design has inspired so many other memorials around the world. Of course, there is one little problem with the wall's design. 140 panels of polished black granite aren't exactly portable. So, unless you can get yourself to Washington, D.C., how are you supposed to experience wall magic for yourself? Well, guess what? We already thought of that. In 1996, VVMF unveiled an exact replica of the wall that could be packed into an 18-wheeler and hauled to cities and towns all across America. Since then, the wall that heals has been displayed in nearly 700 communities throughout the nation, spreading the healing legacy of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial to millions of visitors. Sure, there are other versions of the wall that travel around the country, but the wall that heals is the only one that is an exact replica of the one in Washington, created and maintained by the same organization that built the wall in the first place. And not only that, the wall that heals is accompanied and curated by VVMF employees who work with host communities to ensure that the experience is as close as possible to the real thing. And that includes wall magic. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can check out episode 15 of this podcast to learn what happens to people's hearts when this traveling exhibit rolls into a real-life American community. The wall that heals and the mobile education center that travels with it will be in Panama City, Florida, November 14 through 17. To see the rest of this year's tour schedule and to learn how you can bring the wall that heals to your town, visit vvmf.org. And now, the conclusion of my interview with Neil Hansen.
Airdropping, of course, has got high risk, not only for you in the front of the airplane, but poor guys in the back of the airplane who've got to reposition a load for the next pass or such as that. And what gunners that are on the ground, they weren't good bird shots, but most of your bullet holes would be in the tail of the airplane. And that's where those poor guys were. And we had one up near Site 32 in northern Laos, letting down into make a drop, and had an American loadmaster in the back, and there was a bang, and I knew what that was. That was a round, and the loadmaster in the back, I said, "Are you okay back there?" And he's going, "Oh, oh." And I figured, well, he's hit, and had the co-pilot go back and take a look and see what the hell's going on. And he came back to the cockpit laughing. And I thought, well, this is not funny, buddy. And he says, yeah, it is. He says, the round went into the hydraulic tank there by the right wheel well and was spraying hot red hydraulic fluid on his back. And he thought it was blood. He picked up the nickname Bullet after that. But there was funny things that went on, and also very serious things. December 6th, 1972, I was tasked with going down to southern Laos and airdropping to two fire bases that were harassing the Ho Chi Minh Trail. This was a very hot area as far as bad guys shooting at you. We lost a caribou down there with the loss of the entire crew, got shot down. And Air America, of course, had helicopters in Laos. We were there, and we provided an awful lot of support for the guys coming out of Haiphong and Hanoi that get shot down and have to bail out over Laos. We were there. We were ready to pick them up because the Air Force needed to get permission to cross the fence, as they called it, or the border, because it was a neutral country, to do a pickup. So we did most of the pickups. But down there in Pak Se, the southern part of Laos, we had H-34s operating there, and also a Loach working there, which is the old Hughes 500 helicopter. But the H-34s were the primary tool that they were using, all on bailment from the military. And with no military markings, just H numbers on them. And I got down there and got briefed, and one of the chopper guys came, caught me before I went out to the airplane, and he says, "Don't believe him." And I've been burned a couple times by agents in the field. They're responsible for the area they've been assigned to, and they're trying to get supplies into their troops that are securing that area. And if it's real hot and dangerous, they're not going to tell you that. They want their cargo in there. So I took that with a grain of salt and went out and airdropped at the first site, no problem at all. And since there was another track left in there for the next site down the way, I opted not to climb out. It was only 15 miles away. Just leave the back end open, and I had two tie kickers, Sampap and Buma, and be ready to drop when we get to the next site, and then we're going to go home. And they rogered that. And as I approached the site, it was almost over, the customer on the ground called and said, Big Bird, get out of here, get out of here. AAA, AAA. Well, AAA comes in a lot of different flavors. 12.7, 50 caliber stuff, got green tracers. And they had some quad 50s there, 4-barrel 50 calibers, like a hose. Then you had 23 millimeter. That was an explosive round. And it was white hot when it came out and kind of floating up towards you. And it looks like it's not going to get to you, but then it accelerates as you gets closer and you got a better perspective. And then you have red balls coming up, and that's 37 millimeter or 57 millimeter anti-aircraft rounds, and they're explosive rounds. Well, I didn't see anything, but I brought the jets up and we jigged out of there, and I didn't see anything at all. And I asked Sampop in the back, you guys see anything back there? And he said, yes, Captain. Red balls went by the tail. Well, that's not a happy day. So I went back to Paksay, and the two case officers there, Gray Fox, which had gray hair, and Tall Man, and he was tall and young. And told him what had happened. And they said, oh, there's no big weapons there. And I said, well, how about you go out and talk to my loadmasters and see what they say? And, oh, no, if it makes you happy, we'll have them sweep the area. And I had a bad feeling about that particular term, but waited about a half an hour, and he came back out and he said, oh, there's nothing there. They must have just panicked a little bit. And I said, okay. And we climbed back in it and got on top of a little low cloud deck, and our H-34 choppers were going in and picking up wounded, which told me the bad guys are pretty close. And I listened to them going in and out of the site. And when the last one called clear, I told the guys, hang on in the back. And I took it right down to the jungle canopy. And
you're still trying to drop your second track.
That's right.
Okay.
And asked for the customer on the ground where I'm dropping, keep throwing smoke grenades out in the drop zone. I want a big bubble coming up. And he rogered that, and chasing all the wildlife out of the jungle canopy. And the reason I got down low and fast on that was it's pretty hard to swing a gun barrel, a big gun barrel that fast to lead you enough to get you. And figured I outsmarted these guys, and pulled up just short of the strip, getting up to about 400 feet, and they nailed me. And the first thing I did, I lost the ailerons. Those are the things that make the airplane bank right and left. And she started to roll to the left into the jungle. And to stop that, I pulled the power completely off the right side and idled the right jet. And she slowly came back. I'm down to about 90 knots in the top of the trees, and he's shaking like hell. And started making a little altitude. One of the choppers that had been hanging around to see if we got out of it okay said, you're trailing fluid. And I could see by my right fuel gauge, 700-gallon nacelle tank behind the engine, it was going down fast. So that's where the fluid was. It was fuel coming overboard. I didn't worry about it blowing up out there because we had foamed tanks that would prevent fuel vapors from being explosive in the tank. But pulled up out of there, and the loss of control, I had almost full right rudder and no ailerons whatsoever. I could jockey with power as far as turning, and headed for that old Japanese airstrip that was over there about 15 miles away. And figured I'll either put it in the dirt there or have the crew bail out. But with the lack of control, and the strip was all overgrown with about 6-foot-high elephant grass, I figured it's time to have the guys go for a walk. And lined up on the first pass, and told the co-pilot to go in the back. And when I ring the bell, you guys go. And Sam Pop acknowledged it in the back. And I was about ready to ring the bell for them to jump. And Sam Pop came on the intercom. He get away from us. And he came up the ladder into the cockpit, and he wanted his survival vest. Well, I let him go down the cockpit ladder to the cabin floor and told Sam Pop in the back, take it away from him and throw it out the door. As if he tries to put it on, his parachute won't open. I probably should have let that happen, but I didn't. And on the next pass, about to ring the bell, and he was back in the cockpit. He wanted his camera. He had a Nikon camera that he valued. And I let him grab that, and he got a cut in his forehead from me punching him. And he fell back down the ladder. And I know he can't hang on to it once he exits the airplane. And he'd never jumped before, so they got back there, and I told the guys, I don't care what you do, get him out. And in the next pass, Booma, he jumped. And when co-pilot looked out to see what was going on, Sam Pop wrapped his arms around and took him out the door. Well, the chopper's called. They got 3 good shoots, and that's fine. I'll be out on the next pass. Keep the meter running. And on the next pass, I did lock the controls and pull the power all the way off the right side so it wouldn't start to roll on me. And went down and exited stage door right, not the same troop door. And fell for a ways watching her. And before I pulled. And I was high speed, so the opening shock was violent. And that's why I'm about 1.5 inches shorter than what I used to be.
Than you used to be. Wow.
But ended up in some low scrub and kept the D-ring, put that in my back pocket. Heard a chopper coming for me, and he was going to try to land in this little clearing, but I knew it was too small. His tail rotor hit some of the trees and showered me with branches. And geez, don't follow me now. And he didn't. He picked back up, dropped the sling, and I rode the sling back up into the cabin. And then the rest of the story kept on rattling on.
Yeah. So can we talk about your final days there in 75? What's going on? What's going on around you? What's going on in your mind? What sort of work are you doing? Is it different than the work you were doing before?
Yes, it was, because I was no longer with Air America. I was flying a Conrad or a Convair 440, but that developed from one Convair I brought up there. We lost an engine. Then I started flying C-46. Samaki Peanut airline. It's worked together is what it meant. And it was an old C-46. And first trip out of Phnom Penh, it shook like hell. And the minute I pulled the power back, it smoothed out. Wow. It could have been a tire or something out around. And began flying that out of Kampong Sam, a little town on the coast of Cambodia, on the south coast, and flying rice to various destinations and passengers. And on one of the last trips I flew with that particular airplane was into a town to the northwest of northeast of Phnom Penh. And it had been a pretty hot zone, so you spiraled down over it. And as I let down, there was a bang in the back. And the Chinese co-pilot I had, he says, "Oh, cargo fall over." Hell no, I know what that sound is. But got on the ground, and it was not a secure site. The village elders had been decapitated by the Khmer Rouge, and their heads placed on fence posts around the ramp as a reminder of of how bad it was to be not Khmer Rouge, and for something for the birds to feast upon. And I saw a bullet hole in the right wing, right about 4 inches from the fuel selector valve, out through the wing spar, out through the top of the wing, and through the cabin, and wherever else it wanted to go. But when I got down to Kampong Sam, which was pretty secure, I took a slow walk around that and found nothing but that one bullet hole. But when I came up to the left engine, like most pilots, you'll grab the prop blade, and it moved back and forth. The whole blade was loose in the hub. That's where my vibration was coming from. And that meant wouldn't be too much longer until that blade would leave and take the engine and or wing with it. Well, that got parked. Next, a Convair 440 came open. Anchorwatt Airlines, nice airplane. It was a beauty, and started flying the same trips with that, passengers.
So, I'm sorry. So you've left Air America at some point, and now you're just flying for various airlines in Southeast Asia?
That's right. When
you're
Air
flying
America
for Anchorwatt?
Yeah, Anchorwatt Airlines.
You really did not want to go home.
That's right. That's right. The beat was still going on. And this is from Cambodia. After everything cratered, I went back to Laos. And, yeah, a little demented. But this thing was a fine airplane, and was over in Battambang, which is over by the Thai border. And another friend of mine was there in the ramp, and he had a Convair with a flat nose wheel tire. And we're standing there, and he was commenting on how yellow I was. Well, I had hepatitis at the time, and I'd lost a lot of weight. I was down to 104 pounds. It looked like a cadaver. But as long as I cinched my seatbelt real tight, I could rotate the airplane and get it off the ground. But I could hear a 50 caliber firing outbound from the perimeter. Well, this is not good. And a Cambodian officer came up to us and said, all American, go home. Really? Well, we're American, we're still here. And he said, yes, they come in with helicopters and take your embassy, our generals, and all our politicians and leave. And wow. That's meant that they left all these guys in the field without any leadership or resupply. So they're nothing but fresh meat. Not a good thing to be. I turned to my friend and I said, I'm going to go back down to Kampong Sam, spend the night, and then tomorrow I'm going to go to Bangkok. How about you join me? And he says, yeah, I've got to go into Phnom Penh and get my wife. And I said, well, that's fine, but be there by noon or I'm gone. And he said, okay. And I did. I went back down to Kampong Sam and spent the night there. And the next day, out getting breakfast at a little coffee shop they had there in this motel I was staying at on the beach. And there was a Chinese crew there. They had a DC-3, and they were going to Phnom Penh. And I knew the co-pilot, and I told him, hey, I'd be really careful about that. And if you don't want to fly with him, you can come with me. And his captain overheard him, and both of us. And he says, no, he'd fly with me. You long-nosed round eye, you in trouble. Me Chinese, they don't shoot me. And I said, okay, buddy, that's your problem, not mine. And they took off, went to the airport, and I dawdled around for about half an hour, and I had a Filipino co-pilot. He'd actually never had a pilot's license. He'd had a propeller mechanic's license, but he filled a seat, and I can fly the Convair by myself anyway. So we finally went out to the airport about 10 o'clock. And, it's starting to look a little eerie out there. Noodle stands that normally hang around were closing up their shutters and leaving, and the pedicabs were leaving. And this is not normal in an Asian airport. They usually hang around all day. And got the steward and stewardess I had. Stewart was Cambodian. In fact, he's even on the website that I've got. And he's made recontact with me. And his stewardess, she was 14 years old. And, but that was our problem, not mine. And I told him what's going to happen. And he borrowed the station manager's Land Rover and went into town to get their stuff. And I said, be back here by 12 or we're gone. And he said, yes, he'd do that. And now the ramp is just about empty. Mm-hmm. I can hear a roar of an airplane coming from the north over a low ridge of hills. And it was a DC-3. And he bounced down the strip, spun it around, came back up to the ramp and said, we go. Phnom Penh burning, Phnom Penh burning. And I was almost tempted to say, well, what about you Chinese? I didn't. And he got his co-pilot aside and I says, now you've got a load of Cambodian passengers on board. Do not take them into Don Muang and Bangkok and land there, or you're all going to end up in the Huskow. And he said, yeah. I said, go to Satahib, Thai Air Force Base on the south coast. They won't know what to do with you, but they're not going to throw you in jail. He acknowledged that, and they took off. And it's really eerie out there. And the station manager there, he had a feeling things were going south. And I told him, how about you come with us today? And he looked down at his shoes and said, no, Captain. My family in Phnom Penh. You can't argue with that. I didn't know the Holocaust that was coming. Or I might have forced him on the airplane. We're 1.7 million. We're about to die. But I didn't. And Land Rover came back, looked like it was qualifying for the Indy 500. And he jumped out. He says, nobody in town, nobody in town. Yeah, I know why. They're out in the boondocks hiding until the Khmer Rouge take over. And loaded them in the bird. It's now 12 o'clock. And the air stair door folded into the side. And I cranked the right engine. Temperatures and pressures coming up. And cranked the left engine. And the station manager always stood out to the left front with a fire bottle. And as I released the brakes, he snapped a salute. I guess he'd seen that in the movies somewhere. And I could see the dusty tear tracks on his cheeks. His world was ending. His job, what is happening to his family, nobody knows. And I never did find out. My friend wasn't on the horizon, and I wheeled her out onto the runway. No point on running it up. I'm going to go. Poured the coal to her and came off Cambodian soil for the last time.
Once again, Neil Hansen's book is called Flight, an Air America pilot's story of adventure, descent, and redemption, and it's available on Amazon. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more stories of service, sacrifice, and healing. See you then.